Welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires, the show where we take you on thrilling adventures through the wildest corners of sci-fi and fantasy. I'm your host, Adrian Smith.
And I'm Julia Jones, here to help you separate fact from fiction, or at least have a good laugh trying.
Today we're diving into a story that takes the classic vampire myth and drops it right into the heart of the Appalachian Trail.
That's right. We're talking about what happens when the familiar wilderness you think you know becomes the hunting ground for something a little thirstier.
Our story starts with two hikers, Sarah and Ben. Sarah's looking for some peace and quiet, a chance to escape the city noise and reconnect with nature. Ben, well, let's just say he's a bit more enthusiastic about the whole nature thing.
You know, the type probably owns every nature documentary ever made and can identify bird calls with uncanny accuracy.
Exactly. So picture them trekking through the woods, tired, hungry, and maybe a little lost. Suddenly they stumble upon a cabin.
Now, anyone who's seen a horror movie knows that isolated cabins rarely lead to anything good. But these hikers, they're probably too focused on finding shelter and a hot meal to think about the potential danger.
And that's where they meet Silas, the seemingly charming young man who lives in the cabin. He offers them food, a place to rest, and seems genuinely interested in their journey.
I'm curious, though, what did you think of that meat-heavy stew Silas offered them? It's a classic horror trope, right? Almost too obvious, but then again, when you're hungry.
Right, your judgment might get a little clouded. But what really stood out to me was how Silas kept asking about their hiking route. He was particularly interested in the areas that weren't on any official maps.
That's a great point. It makes you wonder, is he just making conversation, or is he gathering intel, trying to gauge their knowledge of the area?
Exactly. And as the sun starts to set, things take a decidedly creepy turn. Sarah catches a glimpse of something outside the window. Eyes that gleam in the darkness. Something that's definitely not an animal.
It's like the story shifts gears, right? It goes from this almost cozy, lost hikers find shelter vibe to something much more sinister. The tension really ramps up.
Absolutely. And when Sarah confronts Silas about the strange occurrences, his friendly facade cracks. He admits that the wilderness holds dangers far beyond bears and bobcats.
It's a classic horror reveal, that moment when the seemingly safe haven becomes a trap. And for Sarah and Ben, it's the realization that they've walked into something far more terrifying than they could have ever imagined.
And this is where their city skills become a liability. Ben's love of maps and obscure trail knowledge, which might have seemed useless back in the city, suddenly becomes their only hope.
That's an interesting twist on the survival narrative, isn't it? It's not just about physical strength or wilderness know-how. It's about having that unique piece of knowledge, that seemingly useless skill that becomes unexpectedly valuable in a crisis.
Exactly. And as Ben starts talking about the hidden paths, the trails that have disappeared from maps and are only whispered about in local legends, Silas's interest peaks.
But his interest isn't exactly benevolent, is it? It's like he sees their knowledge as a tool, a way to access something he can't reach on his own.
And that's where we leave our hikers at the end of part one, caught in a web of supernatural intrigue. Their survival now dependent on navigating a world where the monster might be their only guide.
But the question is, will they be able to use their knowledge to outsmart a creature that's far older, far stronger, and far more cunning than they are? Welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires, where the wilderness isn't just about roughing it anymore. It's about ancient creatures, hidden paths, and hikers who just walked into their own personal horror movie.
And you know what's really chilling? Is how the story flips our expectations on their heads.
Right. You'd think the experienced wilderness expert would be the one calling the shots, the one with the upper hand. But here, it's the vampire who's out of his depth. He's got the whole creature of the night thing down pat. But these hidden paths, they're a different beast altogether.
It's like Silas has spent centuries playing by the rules of the supernatural world, mastering the shadows and preying on the unsuspecting. But these hidden paths, they're like a glitch in the system, even for him. And suddenly, Ben, the guy who geeks out over topographic maps, becomes the most valuable asset.
I mean, imagine that your friend's obsession with local lore, the stuff you usually tune out, is now the key to surviving a vampire encounter.
Talk about feeling validated. But it's also terrifying. Think about it. You're not just dealing with a bloodthirsty predator, you're dealing with one who needs your specific obscure knowledge to get what he wants.
This isn't your average build a fire and wait for rescue scenario. They're deciphering cryptic clues, navigating landscapes that seem to shift and change, all while trying to stay on a vampire's good side. It's like they've walked into one of Ben's beloved nature documentaries, but with a much more menacing narrator.
And here's where it gets even more complex. Silas, as creepy as he is, isn't just a one-dimensional villain. He's shown some restraint, even a hint of curiosity. It makes you wonder, is he purely driven by his hunger, or is there something more at play?
It's like the story is forcing us to reconsider what we think we know about monsters. Are they all just mindless predators, or are there layers of complexity, maybe even a twisted morality that we don't fully understand?
It's a question that resonates with us on a deeper level, don't you think? I mean, haven't we all been in situations where we've had to reassess what we consider dangerous? The things that scare us in this city aren't necessarily the same things that threaten us out in the wilderness, both literally and metaphorically.
Absolutely. And this story taps into that primal fear of the unknown, the things that lurk just beyond our comprehension, that feeling of vulnerability of being completely out of your depth. It's something we can all relate to.
But here's the thing. It's also a story about resilience, about finding the strength to adapt and think on your feet.
hmm
Sarah and Ben, they're not supernatural hunters or wilderness survivalists. They're just two ordinary people who've been thrown into an extraordinary situation.
And what's inspiring is how they rise to the challenge. They're learning that survival isn't just about physical strength. It's about mental agility, about seeing opportunity where others see only danger. They're even starting to understand that sometimes the monster isn't the enemy. Sometimes it might be the only one who can help you find your way.
It's a powerful message wrapped up in this thrilling tale of vampires and hidden paths. But the question remains, will Sarah and Ben be able to use their newfound knowledge to their advantage, or will they become pawns in Silas's mysterious game?
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll uncover the final twists and turns of this chilling tale.
Welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires, where we're exploring the dark and twisty trails of our imaginations. You know, those paths where myth and reality blur like a bad special effect.
And we're picking up right where we left off with Sarah and Ben, our intrepid hikers, leading Silas the vampire deeper into the heart of the hidden paths.
They made a deal with a creature of darkness, hoping their knowledge would be their salvation. But the deeper they go, the more they realize they might be playing a game they don't fully understand.
What's fascinating about this final act is the power dynamic. You have these seemingly ordinary humans armed with nothing but a map and their wits holding leverage over a being of immense power and ancient knowledge. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely skills can become our greatest assets.
Talk about a survival strategy you wouldn't see coming. I mean, imagine teaching a vampire about the nuances of forgotten trails and local lore. It's like something out of a twisted fairy tale.
And let's not forget the constant tension between Sarah and Silas. She's not buying his charm offensive for a second. She's watching his every move, questioning his motive, always aware that their survival depends on staying one step ahead of him.
You can really sense her protectiveness over Ben, her fierce determination to keep them both alive. It's like she's constantly calculating, weighing the risks, knowing that one wrong move could turn them from guides to dinner.
It's a reminder that survival often hinges on more than just physical strength or wilderness skills. It's about mental agility, emotional intelligence, and the ability to read people, even if those people happen to be centuries-old vampires.
And then there's Ben. Bless his heart. He's still trying to wrap his head around everything that's happening. He's gone from enthusiastic nature nerd to reluctant vampire expert, deciphering ancient symbols and piecing together forgotten legends.
But even amidst the fear and uncertainty, there's still that glimmer of wonder in him. He's like a kid in a spooky museum, except the exhibits are trying to suck his blood.
And as they journey deeper into these hidden paths, the landscape itself starts to warp and twist, reflecting the growing unease and the blurring lines between reality and something far stranger.
Trees contort into impossible shapes, shadows dance with a life of their own, and time seems to flow differently. It's as if they've stepped into a realm where the laws of nature have been rewritten. And for Sarah and Ben, it's a crash course in letting go of their preconceived notions of what's possible.
It's a powerful metaphor, isn't it? The idea that the deeper we venture into the unknown, the more our understanding of the world has to shift and adapt. We have to open ourselves to the possibility that things might not be what they seem.
Exactly. And as they navigate this increasingly surreal landscape, they start to sense a shift in Silas. His thirst for something more than blood, a hunger for knowledge and power, becomes harder to ignore.
It's like they struck a deal with the devil, and the terms of the contract are suddenly much less clear. They helped him navigate the hidden paths. But what happens when they reach their destination? Will their usefulness have expired?
And as the story reaches its climax, we're left wondering, will their newfound knowledge be enough to secure their freedom, or will they become pawns in Silas's game, sacrificed for his ambitions?
The ending, without giving anything away, is both unsettling and thought-provoking. It leaves you questioning the nature of power, the allure of the unknown, and the lengths we'll go to for survival.
And that's what makes this story so much more than just a vampire tale. It's a reflection of our own anxieties about the world, the forces we don't understand, the deals we make, and the choices we face when the stakes are high.
So as we wrap up this episode of Robots versus Vampires, remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones with fangs and claws. They're the shadows within ourselves, the choices we make when pushed to the edge, and the realization that the wilderness, both literal and metaphorical, is full of surprises, and not all of them are pleasant.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep your wits about you. Never know what might be lurking just around the bend.